I don't know whether to laugh or cry, but I'm so sick of these Republicans. And by Republicans, I'm not talking about business associates or Republicans because they don't want to pay taxes. I'm talking about Fox News, which is, let's face it, it's a propaganda arm of the Republican Party. I'm talking about these lawyers that Trump hires and then he fires, and he hires and he fires. I'm sick and tired of these people just lying all the time. Just lying. And the ones I have in mind right now are lawyers. And I've encountered in my career a handful of lawyers who lied. Just flat out lied. And in every single case, I have eventually succeeded in getting sanctions against them. One fellow got hit with sanctions for almost $700,000 for lying. So they pay a price. Most lawyers I've met are very honest and don't lie at all. They may try to shade things or slant things a certain way or whatever, but they don't flat out lie. And so I'm watching Donald Trump's lawyer. He was his lawyer yesterday. He's not his lawyer today. I'm not sure why he left. Could be many reasons, and I am not going to speculate. But I heard him say Donald Trump had every right to keep those documents because the Presidential Records Act says that after a president leaves the White House, that the ownership and the possession of presidential documents or documents created in his administration are his. He's the one who is entitled to have possession of those documents. And then today, I'm watching Fox News. I always watch Fox News to see what their reaction is going to be. And Neil Cavuto, who sometimes I like, had somebody on there, some hack lawyer. And this is a lawyer, I could tell he was going to lie because every time he got ready to lie, his voice would go up an octave. Well, as soon as he did that, I knew he was going to lie. So he said the same thing. Well, under the Presidential Records Act, Donald Trump had every right to have those documents. He's the one under the Presidential Records Act, and I'm saying it slowly because I want those of you who are watching who maybe question whether I'm telling you the truth to go look it up. You can find it on Google. That under the Presidential Records Act, Donald Trump had every right to those documents, and so for them to go after him for keeping documents in his possession when he had the absolute right under the Presidential Records Act to keep those documents, why, that's a travesty. There's no way in the world he's guilty of a crime for keeping documents to which he is entitled to have possession. So I said, well, boy, that's twice I've heard that now from two lawyers. So I looked it up. You don't have to be a lawyer to look it up these days. You just go on Google, it's all right there. Under the Presidential Records Act, it says exactly the opposite. That the National Archives are supposed to have custody of presidential documents after a president leaves office. They don't belong to the former president. He does not have any right to their possession. They belong with the National Archives. So, I'm like, these people both got there and talked to mainly Fox News people who believe anything that they hear because they want to believe it, not because they've objectively analyzed and looked at it and said, oh yeah, they're telling me the truth. I looked up the Presidential Records Act, and sure enough, Donald Trump's entitled to keep those records. They don't do that. They hear it and they believe it. They accept it and they say, what's wrong with Biden? He's out there prosecuting this innocent man. And of course, Trump says, I'm an innocent man, but he never explains why. That innocent man for holding documents that the law entitles him to hold. No, the National Archives is the institution which holds those records. And why is that? Why do they enact that law and put that provision in there? Because imagine if Donald Trump was entitled to have possession of these documents, he took them away in order to make it difficult, if not impossible, for the incoming president, Joe Biden, to do his job. Bear that in mind. If he took documents that Biden would need in order to effectively carry out his role as president. If that's what and without the Presidential Records Act, he could probably get away with doing that. And I don't know for sure. It's kind of like Bill Maher says, I don't know how I know it. I just know that was one of the things that Donald Trump was thinking. I'll just take these documents away from you. It wasn't that he was going to use them for any purpose. What's he going to do with them? You know, left them lying around all over the place. But I'll just take as much as I can away from Biden. Also, it may have been a concern that that there may have been some things in there that it could have cast him in a very negative light, like this document regarding the invasion of Iran, which I don't want to get into that in any detail, but you know, there could be documents in there that may make Trump look bad, and he wouldn't want Biden or anybody in the government to get a hold of these things. Or he may have thought he was still president because he won the election, and even though Biden tried to steal it from him, Trump was still really the president, so he was entitled to have these documents, and he needed them so he could actually conduct the government business from Mar-a-Lago. I don't know what he was thinking. I personally think he's got a screw loose. But in any event, he certainly did not have any right to do so, and certainly not under the Presidential Records Act, which says exactly the opposite of what these people were saying. And it makes me so mad. There should be disciplinary proceedings that could be taken against lawyers for misrepresentations they make outside of the courtroom and not just in the courtroom. So much for that. But the other thing that's really annoying to me is, and again, I don't know whether to laugh or explode here, is when I listen to Donald Trump and Republicans talk about the hypocrisy of the Democrats because they're not indicting Joe Biden. You know, remember the lock her up thing with Hillary Clinton? You know, demanding that and he gave all these speeches about how terrible it was that she had all of these classified documents in her own home on her own server, and then she may have destroyed them, and who knows what. Well, she didn't have any classified documents, folks. What she had was a private server in her house in which she had communications with people. Sometimes people who had information which could be useful to her as a Secretary of State, but none of those documents went through the State Department. They came to her personally, and she looked at them, and most of them were just personal, discussions about birthdays and whatever. So she didn't harbor classified documents because they never went through a classification process because nobody saw them but her. So to say that she had classified documents on a server in her house is a lie. She didn't have classified documents anyplace, and that's why the FBI didn't file charges against her. It's why the Justice Department didn't file charges against her, because she didn't do anything criminal. And yet they're out there screaming, "Lock her up, lock her up, lock her up!" And now that Donald Trump has actually committed crimes, where's the lock her up crime? But the second hypocrisy that goads me is that Trump, remember when Trump got impeached the first time? I bet you dollars to donuts most of you don't even know what that was all about. What that was about was Donald Trump was trying to pressure the president of Ukraine. None of us knew who the president of Ukraine was back then. No one cared. We all know today. It was the same guy, Zelensky. And the U.S. government, and with him signing off, had agreed to send money for arms to Ukraine, which they needed because even back then the Russians were sending tanks into western Ukraine, and it wasn't that long after that they took Crimea. So those defense monies, the monies necessary for that, were extremely important to the then survival of Ukraine. And that, of course, that was just the beginning of what's going on today. So Donald Trump held that money back. He said, and then he contacted this president of Ukraine. He says, "You can have this money, but I want you to either bring charges against Joe Biden for corruption," which they're still trying to push in that House committee, which is another thing that gets me. And the fellow said, "Well, we don't have any evidence to bring charges against Biden." He said, "Well, then here's what I want you to do. I want you to go on national television on Ukraine." He's telling the president of Ukraine that president of Ukraine, you need to go on television in your country, says I, Donald Trump, because I'm president of the United States and I have a check here that I'm going to hold back from you. I want you to go on your national television, and I want you to tell the world that you are undertaking and have instituted criminal investigations against Joe Biden for corruption and bribery in Ukraine. And if you do that, you can get your money. And the guy refused. Trump held up his money. Then people within the State Department saw what was going on. They raised hell about it. Eventually, the money went over. That's why he was fundamentally impeached the first time, for using the money that the Congress had voted to send to Ukraine, holding that money back in order to cause the president of Ukraine to make a false statement on television, falsely making accusations that they were investigating Joe Biden for a crime. Now that was what Trump did back in those days. And it's like, because he knew that Joe Biden was going to be running, and he knew that Joe Biden could probably beat him. So this was how he was going to preempt Joe Biden's ability to run against him for the presidency. And then this guy has the nerve to turn around and talk about how I'm being hounded here, and they're just, this is a witch hunt about my political enemies, and I've done nothing wrong. And he keeps saying, I'm an innocent man, I've done nothing wrong. The trouble is, the evidence is massive. And all of these Republicans were echoing the line, oh, well, this is horrible. And I'm seeing all these Republican congressmen. You know, you're not seeing do that. You're not seeing Mitch McConnell joining in this chorus. But McCarthy, he's almost as bad as the original Joe McCarthy, who was the senator from Wisconsin, who ran around calling everybody a communist until he died of alcoholism. So, I mean, what's with these McCarthys anyway? Are they really from Ireland? I can't believe it. I think they're just pretend to be Irish. Their name is probably, I don't know. I don't want to speculate, because I don't want to, be accused of being anti any ethnic group, but they're probably Italian. So anyway, these phony Irishmen, the McCarthys, were really Italians, are out there going this massively platitudinous, nonsensical, lying speech about how, well, this is just terrible. This is nothing more than the President Biden is prosecuting President Trump just because of political purposes, because they're political opponents, and yada yada yada. So basically, hey, if you're running for president, you can do whatever the hell you want to do, and you can't be prosecuted, because if you do, well, that's political. Well, it's not political, and I think the problem Republicans are facing is that independents are not buying this garbage. Republicans still buy this garbage, and if you're a Republican and you're still buying this garbage, you need to ask yourself why. And there are a few Republicans of character like Mitt Romney and Mitch McConnell and Asa Hutchinson, who actually do have some principles and some morals left, but they're few and far between. What's happened now is the Republican Party is the same old fundamental Republican Party it's always been, when it had people like Richard Nixon as its standard bearer. So, I had people, oh, he's picking on the Republicans. I don't pick on Republicans because they're Republicans. It's because of what they do. And it's because of what their base stands for, and because of all these politicians are cynical, and they tell the base whatever they want to hear, and now they've got this spokes station, this Fox News, and they just keep doing it and doing it and doing it and shoveling it and shoveling it and shoveling it, and I'm sick and tired of it. And hopefully most people are as well, and I think that the independents in this country are on the verge of leaving the Republican Party altogether. And when and if they do, the Republican Party is history. And so, the polls that I'm seeing anyway, and of course it's going to be interesting to see how the polls shape out on this whole, these charges that were just filed against Trump. Ironically, something like 60% of the American people approved of the bringing of the charges against Trump by that DA in New York. I was not one of those. I thought, well, let's wait and see what they're all about. When I saw what they were all about, I saw they were all about, in my opinion, basically nothing, and they shouldn't have been filed, and I think he just did it for political purposes. And that was a bad mistake. It gave the Trump people a lot of things to legitimately complain about in that case. But this time, they don't have any legitimate complaints as far as I can see. And the more Republican office holders and congressmen and then rank and file people and all these former, I'm not going to use the name I used to use, but the MAGAs are going to come out there and say that this is all persecution of Trump. Every time they do that, I can just see another independent saying, that's it, I've had it with those people. And you know what? They're digging their own grave, and they're welcome to it.